Greetings all, D&Disability here. Being several videos in and with NEPCA fast approaching, I think it is time I finally begin my series and show you, not just tell you, where my research has come from and finally do what I promised about 2 years ago, which was to give this information back to those who supported me and to show everyone exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about as an academic and why it matters. So, this is D&Disability exploring CRIP RPG experiences. My thesis was centered around the claim that disabled players utilize games such as Dungeons and Dragons to achieve a greater sense of agency, build community, generate social capital by working with that community, that the games are used to help overcome and cope with their own disabilities, and that all of this is in spite of games such as D&D neglecting the disabled player and doing very little to help or acknowledge them. So what do I mean by these terms? Disabled player, yes, is disability first language. It's not identity first. I'm putting the emphasis on the label that is the disabled. And I'm putting the emphasis not just on the disability, but on the act of play. The challenge of disabilities, as you see me discussing this, is not referring to necessarily the disability itself. However, it's referring to the extra effort, the difficulties, very often overlooked even by disabled players, that are required to engage in TTRPGs both before, during, and after the game. Ultimately, I used literary analysis as well as ethnography and performance theory along with other interdisciplinary methods to come to my solutions. Whilst I relied on many scholars, some of the ones I relied on most were Turner, Adams, Konetsnicki, I'm sorry for butchering your name, and Jones. Each interview was conducted as a Q&A, and there were 18 interviews in total. But they were all centered around the theme of these three questions. How do disabled players interact with role-playing games? How do disabled players reframe their idea of play? And to disabled players, what is the value of role-playing games within their identity construct? Over the course of this video series, we will explore these emergent themes: agency through narrative, community building, the challenge of disabilities, coping with disabilities, the acceptance and or rejection of disabilities, and what I mean by disability itself, our battles with both the uppercase D, the label that society has given us as a whole, and the lowercase d, that is what we as players with disabilities deal with on kind of a personal. So what do I mean by challenges? I mean transportation to and from games. I mean processing text, whether that's due to visual or neurological or some other impairment. Whether that is financial security. Often those with disabilities are financially limited, and the luxury that is role-playing games is difficult for them, particularly with new games or with buying miniatures. Recently, I just spent about $80 buying 5 solid pewter miniatures. That's not something, the typical person would do, and that's not even something I typically. But there are an endless series of challenges that could be discussed or could be explored, but these are really just a few, all concerning the space and navigating that space within tabletop role-playing games. Take the field, you must have an army. Disabled players gather and maintain their armies of fellow players in their own tight-knit communities. Figures such as Bauman, Huizinga, Konetsnicki, which is not how you pronounce your name, but that's how I've been saying it for years, Williams, and others have demonstrated the role of games as community builders and generators of social capital for RPGs. Community building is defined as the process of gaining or strengthening relationships with others, and which may, but not always, have a monetary benefit. For disabled players in particular, the act of community building through tabletop role-playing games and other RPGs is a central element of why they remain attractive to disabled players despite their intrinsic challenges. Additionally, the game can take the form of the disabled player's primary form of socialization for the week, the only time they interact with this friend group, or even lead to monetary opportunities such as employment or the development of skills that aid employment. Community building is what gives tabletop role-playing games their staying power within communities and can be either in person or online. In person, games often take place in homes, coffee shops, bars, game stores. Online games and communities form in places such as Discord and often work as an acceptable compromise that allows for play while circumventing many of the challenges that come with in-person gaming. While many disabled players struggle to engage in social activities, TTRPGs provide the needed starting point where players begin to assert themselves on equal terms with the other players while building long-lasting relationships. Players, such as the ones you see in front of you, enjoy the game for different reasons, but all are centered around the community building aspect. Luke, on one hand, does not necessarily enjoy tabletop role-playing games, or at least the genre that he plays regularly. Rather, he's doing it entirely for the social interaction. Joy, on the other hand, cares mostly not about the content of the game, but that they can spend the time having fun, creating characters, and exploring the experience. Crane, on the other hand, whose mobility is limited both due to physical reasons and location, struggles to make friends and participate in physical games, rather turning to an online gaming community instead of a in-person one. Crane, as an example, as someone with autism, and as of 2018, a partial disability in their left arm, which makes them unable to lift more than 50 pounds. For them, him, most of the people that they've encountered, that they've played with over the years, have been disabled in some form. Crane plays almost entirely digitally because, quote, well, I mean, New Jersey might be the most populated state in terms of population density, but it's really hard to make friends in that regard when there's no game shop near you. The third spaces that Crane refers to are what make it difficult for him to engage in community activities, but nonetheless, they feel that the struggle to maintain an online community is worthwhile. The game has become an incentive for maintaining social connections with other disabled players, avoiding isolation, and an excuse to engage with others. In his words, who cares if you don't make it to the end of the campaign? What matters is that the game happened at all. Crane maintained a community of disabled friends and successfully overcame the lack of game resources in his local area. It's not about the game. It is about having friends to play the game with and in the first place, which makes the community aspect a crucial one. Community building for those players is a central aspect of their TTRPG experience. It encourages the maintenance of social relations, such as with Crane and Joy, and helps players, such as Carmine or Luke in this example, engage in social activities rather than solitary ones. TTRPGs for disabled players are about the friendships they made and the social interactions they have. These terms dictate the success and failure of their games, not the winning or losing within the game environment. Alright, y'all. I know this was a short one, but please, if you like this kind of content, if you want me to keep making this series, I need to see some good views on this. I'd like to see some likes, ideally 1 like per person. I know that's a lot to ask. Share it with your friends, subscribe, and I will come out next week with the part 2 to this series, Agency.